Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Druchunas, and I'm a student at SAW and an iPad junkie. So I kind of volunteered to set up a Zoom every couple of weeks where we could talk about different features of Procreate and sometimes other apps that we can use for creating comics. I apologize that I'm in the dark, but if I turn my lights on, then my iPad just shows a reflection of the lights. So for right now, today's setup, I made it so you could see my iPad and not my face. And we're going to just go over some basics of the iPad interface today and just get a especially Procreate interface and what things you'll see on the screen. But I thought, let's see, it looks like there's 10 or 12 of you here. I don't know if we take like a minute a piece and just say your name and like how much you know about using Procreate or digital art, because if you've used Photoshop or Corel Photo Paint or other things in the past, basically you'll just be learning the new names for the features that Procreate has that are probably the same as what you used in the past. So I'm Donna. I started using Photoshop before it had layers, which means Photoshop 2 in the, I don't know, it might have probably was, yeah, in the 90s. I don't remember how long ago it was. And I worked for a software graphics company for about 10 years. So I know a lot about technical graphics stuff from the background. I wasn't an artist in that job, but I learned a lot of technical stuff. And I had to learn how to use a lot of graphics software. And I got an iPad last November, and I haven't touched a sketchbook since, which is going to be remedied soon, but I've been working exclusively on the iPad, which has been fun and doing a lot of learning. So we can just go in any order, or do you want me to just say who I see next on my screen? I see Erla next on my screen.
Okay. Hi, I'm Harrison. I live in Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia. I came to Procreate just, I think about a year ago. I really don't know much about it. I'm trying to catch up on my education through suggested YouTube videos Donna suggested, and also starting to go through the SAW resources too. There's some videos through there. I've mostly drawn and done watercolors, and I like to travel, so I always set up learning how to do things for when I'm going to get to where I'm traveling. So now I'm trying to fill in all the pieces with Procreate so I can use it to work on a graphic memoir I'm working on. Thanks for doing this for us, Donna.
Great, thank you. Okay, I see next, Inga.
Yes, I'm Inga. I have started drawing comics in May, and I've taken Domestika classes. And then I discovered the books by Tom Hart. I didn't buy them, but I discovered then the SAW site, and I bought them today because I enrolled in the one-year course. And I thought, well, if I compare the price of the books to the price of 1 month, then it's just nothing. And I'm very happy I've done both. And so now I got an iPad Air 3, which is used, and I got a pen because I'm sort of allergic to Bluetooth. I've got a Logitech Crayon, and I'm looking very, very much forward to this course. And I think Donna Druchunas, your announcement of doing this has also been an inspiration to finally get an iPad to draw on.
Oh, great, great. Well, it'll be fun and make some things easier. Randall?
Hey, I've been using Procreate, I don't know, for a year or so, but I just use it basic. Well, I use it as black and white pen and ink drawings, and a little color here and there, and usually on just one layer. I just use the layer that I start on, other than if I add any text to it, I'll have those layers. But since I started with saw, I went back to pen and ink. And then what I was doing was what I still do is do the pen and inks on paper and then scan them in and then change, work with them in Procreate. So I know something about it, but now in the last few weeks, I've actually been using color in Procreate, but I use it as the inks, just changing the opacity and usually with just one pen. I don't change brushes too much and I don't use a lot of brushes. I don't do. But anyway, one of the things I don't know how to do is when you put your line drawing on, that you can work underneath it and keep the line drawing on the top. And that was
Right.
one thing up. And I think you did something a while back about it, but it was over my head at the time and probably still will be now. But anyway, that was one
No,
thing I
we'll
think.
definitely-
But
definitely
anyway,
will go over that.
I love Procreate, but you know what? I absolutely despise the Apple Pencil. It's like drawing with a big piece of plastic. It has no give. It has no, if they would improve that instead of making it just stylish to look at and make it where it really felt like a pen, I probably would never go back to paper. But anyway, that's just my
That's interesting. Yeah.
observation.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. We'll definitely go over the basics for beginners of how to do separate layers with ink and coloring and things like that. So, and it won't be over anyone's head because we'll just do it from the beginning and take it slow. Deb, I see you next. Are you there?
I am. Hi. So I too started, I think Donna, you and me got our iPads and started Procreate at the same time last September. I think it was. I remember I got mine with the sale for students, and I claimed myself to be a student. And I got it specifically for Procreate, and I love it, but it's always going to be a learning curve experience type thing for me. I'm slow. But I'm very happy you're doing this, and that's it.
Great, thanks. We don't have to learn everything you can do in Procreate. We only need to learn the features that we need for our own projects. So that's something that will probably help with the learning curve because I know there is a ton of stuff. Yeah. Palmer?
Howdy. I've been using Procreate now for about 2 years after going to one of the workshops in Gainesville. And I'm all the way out in Idaho. So I have favorite brushes and I managed to make something with Procreate already. Just a graphic memoir, black and white.
Wow.
I have a color cover, but it's not expert. The black and white I'm getting good at, but I need help with color and I'm just really inspired. So I'm looking forward to doing more with others.
Great, great. Thomas or Tom?
Hi, I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and I got an iPod, 8th generation iPad about 4 months ago. And my background is as a sketchbook artist for decades, and but I'm really excited and challenged by the Procreate program, and I saw this workshop, and it's really what I need right now because I don't have a lot of technical know-how about it, but I've been experimenting with it for 4 months, and I have a gallery of stuff here, but I'd like to see what more I can learn, and I appreciate you having this webinar. Whatever. Thank you.
Great, happy to do it. Susan?
Hi, I'm a total iPad junkie. It is my favorite toy, hands down. I use it probably more than any other single thing. And I've been using Procreate for about 3 years. I think I bought my, that generation of iPad to be able to do that. I upgraded to the larger size last summer and have enjoyed the larger size. I feel like I'm a pretty good advanced beginner. I'm particularly interested in learning how to adjust the settings of the brushes and learn masks at some point. I just, my head can't get wrapped around masks, but you know, unlike some of the rest of you who really prefer traditional materials, I really prefer digital materials. In part, it kind of manages the amount of clutter that I accumulate in my life. So, and I'm super happy to have a daytime workshop. I joke about I go to bed really early and I get up really early, and I'm delighted that this is accessible for people who are awake in the United States mornings time, especially for Inky.
Great, great, thanks. Meg, I see you next.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay. I travel for a living. And so as soon as I could get an iPad, I did, because it was hard carrying all the paper and pens and inks, and paper's really heavy. And so, I'm like Palmer. I've done a project of Procreate before. I made this little book for my granddaughter, and I don't know if you could see, but I did color, and I used a stroke that was mimicked color pencil, because that was sort of the quality I wanted it to have. But my hugest problem with it was layers, and I always was running out of layers. And so that's why I'm here. So I'm hoping eventually there'll be something of help with layer management and Procreate, because since Adobe Fresco has come out, I've been almost entirely switched over to using Adobe Fresco for everything, because layers can go on forever there.
Sure, sure. And it really doesn't matter what software you use. It's just, what you enjoy. And that can be for different reasons, like running out of layers. But yeah, I definitely will talk about layers and layer management, because I have a specific way that I deal with layers that I just developed out of my own as a habit. And I'll share that and some other ideas that I've seen that other people do with layers, because there's lots of different ways to do things with Procreate.
Well, and I started this all, just learning, hunting and pecking on my own. So it's great to just actually get to learn from someone else, because so far it's just been whatever I cobbed together.
Yeah, yeah. Monica?
Hi, everybody. My name's Monica. I live in Laurel, Maryland. I started using Procreate. I got the iPad, I think in 2018. So I started using Procreate right around that time. This is my first time ever using, like you said that you used, did you say you used Photoshop? And okay, so this is my first digital art software that I've ever used. And so I started playing with it, and I know how to do some things. I just don't know how to do there. I feel like I'm uncomfortable with the layers. Like I still feel like I'm always drawing too long on one layer and I forget. I feel like I'm not using things to their fullest functions. So I'd like to know more about how to make textures. I use it a lot for work. So I make coloring sheets. So I made this. This is something I made. I don't know if you can see. This is my boss. This is my boss. It's an illustration I did for a newsletter. So I know how to. I feel like I'm accidentally discovering things, and I just feel like I want to be more secure about what I know how to use. So
Great.
Yeah.
Ash? Think you're muted?
Yeah, were you calling on me, Beverly? Okay, hi. Well, I just finished this year-long course, and I hadn't really drawn a lot before. Definitely hadn't drawn cartoons or comics I just kind of maybe took a few drawing classes, and somehow during my course with the year-long course, people talked about Procreate. So I got an iPad 12 and I got Procreate and I just started drawing on it. So I sort of learned to draw and learned about, I mean, I know nothing about Photoshop, nothing. I mean, I have another whole other career. I'm not an artist at all. So yeah, I sort of learned all at the same time, and I have lots of similar experiences. I kind of learned about layers, but I'm not very organized. I know about this multiply thing where you can put a background and then you can erase and it doesn't erase other things. I think someone said accidental. I think I've been learning accidentally. I've looked at some videos, and Donna, you did something for SAW that was really, really useful. So almost all my drawing now, sometimes I think on paper and then I know how to redo it and use that Medibang to put it on. Thank you very much, Donna, for that. To put it onto Procreate, and I can trace. So I kind of know how to do all of those things, but I'm learning to draw, learning Procreate, learning about digital all at the same time. So
Great. Okay.
anything is good for me. It's all up.
Okay. Great. Ashish, I'm not sure.
Ashish is fine. So hi
Ashish,
everybody.
okay. Hi.
Good to see you. And yeah, so I'm in India these days, and I also scribble on the iPad, and finally ended up buying Procreate, and it's been tremendous for me because it allows me to sketch any point of time I want to. I always wanted to drift to watercolors, papers, and pen, but somehow I haven't done that. And I keep on experimenting with Procreate to try and make a different style. So I saw this announcement and I said, wow, this is like great. Finally, I can have some structured learning. Because when you open the software, it shows you the sample images and they look like out of the world. So I hope one day I can get closer to those colorful, paintings or whatever they are. So thanks again for doing this, Donna. This is tremendous. So look forward to learning with everybody. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Is that everybody? Did I miss anyone? I think I got everyone. Okay. I'm going to go to my iPad and I'm just going to show you what's on the screen, go briefly over the basic interface. And then starting next week, I'll have like a little exercise that we can do together where we will draw something and learn a technique, learn something about brushes or learn something about layers or masks. And I'll focus on one topic each week. And then I also want to gather questions or specific things that you guys want to know about. So you can always just post them under the Procreate and other tech topic, or just message me, because I want to have a combination of having a little exercise that I make up that we do together to learn a couple features, and then covering something that you are working on that has you stuck. Okay, so I'm going to spotlight my iPad. And I've set it to the dark interface because that's how it is easier on the camera. Okay, and my phone wants me to, well, you can see everything okay, right? Because my phone's saying, do you want to join audio? No. So when you first open Procreate, as Ashish said, you just see the sample art that they give you. Now, this is all stuff that I've created. I deleted the sample art, and this is all things that I've done on my iPad since I got it. Well, also things that I imported from my sketchbooks that I might want to work on the iPad later. So it looks like a lot of stuff. Mostly I have organize my things into stacks, and we'll talk about those later. But after a while, you have so many drawings that you can't see them all. So you can organize them into what Procreate calls stacks, which is kind of like files and folders on your other devices or your laptop and so forth. So that's all you see there. is the drawings that already are existing, and then you have select, import, photo, and a plus in the upper right corner of the screen. So to select, you can do stuff with the documents you already created. You can import from different places like Dropbox or Apple Files or iCloud. You can import a photo from the photos on your device, on your iPad, or you can create a new document. So we're going to create a new document, and it comes up with a list of sizes. Right now, I'm just going to select screen size, but we'll be going over in our first lesson next week, how to decide what size your file should be and what color, all the options for creating a new file. When it comes up, it fills the whole screen of the iPad. I like to make it a little smaller so I can see where the edges are. And you just do that by pinching to make it smaller, and you pinch out to make it bigger. And you can move it around on the screen to make it comfortable for you to draw on. If you pinch and let go real quick, it goes back to the full size. So that's just how to work with that. I always find it easier to draw if I make it a little smaller and tilt it rather than tilting my whole iPad. So that's just a habit I got into. You'll see there's 3 areas where there's stuff on the screen. On the left is things that control your brushes and a special tool that you can set for whatever you want. On the top, the gallery text will take you back to your main screen with the pictures of, that you've already created. The tool wrench, the one that looks like a little wrench, has all kinds of things, like a lot of stuff in it. All kinds of features and you can insert photos and things and add text and cut and copy. You can change the size of your canvas and some of the features of it. You can share things like save your file, Procreate file on your iCloud drive, say, for example, or save a JPEG to your photo album or different things like that. All different ways to share things. You can make a time-lapse video of your drawings. That's something we probably won't go over for quite a while. You can set some preferences. So I was talking about the dark and light interface. So I like to work on Procreate in this light interface, but I'm not sure it shows up that good on the camera. So you can just switch that back and forth. And if you are lefty or righty, you can move this piece on the side with the brush controls to the other side of the screen with this right hand interface and different things in here. We'll go over that. That's more advanced. And then there's a help that I've never looked in, because when I want to figure something out, I just Google it and I find it that way instead. I find that having someone else explain it's usually easier. Okay, upper right, these are the things you're going to be using for drawing. So the first one, the paintbrush, is your brushes. I have a ton of brushes that I imported to play with that I use for my projects that I don't use. But Procreate comes with plenty of brushes, and you probably will never have to buy any. You can do amazing art with just what's in Procreate, but as you are developing your style for digital art, you may find that you want different brushes. So this dry ink one is the one I use for my inking and all my drawing in Procreate. I just like how it works and how it shows up. And it was one that came with Procreate. So if I hold my pen really straight up and down, I get a pretty thin solid line. This top controller here changes the size of your brush. So there I can get a really thick solid line, and I can move that up and down. Tip for you, just for getting started, is if you're working on comics and you want consistency and you pick a brush that you love for your inking, write down what it is and write down what size you are using it on in a specific project, because it's hard to get it back to that exact size by guessing later in the future. Okay, so These are also pressure sensitive. So with some degree, if I press harder with the Apple pencil, it gets thicker. If you're using a different stylus, it works a little bit differently. Some of them might be pressure sensitive and some might not. So the exact way the features work are made to work best with the Apple pencil. But when we talk about brushes more, I'll show you what the differences are between whether you're using an Apple pencil or another stylus. And then some of the brushes have a tilt feature where if you kind of tip it on the side, it gives you a lighter kind of washed out in it, effect. So there's regular, pressure, and tilt. And combinations of those give you different things with the brushes. So that's something that you should play with quite a bit. And start with just a couple brushes, like maybe a pencil, an inking brush. There's a whole selection of inking brushes that come with Procreate. And there's pencils, they have they're categorized. So for me, for comics, the inking brush is the number one you need to like decide what you like for drawing your main drawing. Coloring, you'll use different brushes depending what style of coloring you want. Okay, so next to the pen is the smudge tool, and that just smudges. It just, like if you're drawing in charcoal or pencil and you use your finger to smudge stuff, you can do that. You can also go into the smudge tool and pick any brush that you want to use. Any brush that you have can be used as a smudging brush. I have this dissolve smudge brush that I got with a set of brushes that I really like. So that's what I have it set to, because I like how that smudges with a little texture. But for basics, you can try anything that you want. I think a softer brush or one that shows a kind of cloudy or bigger preview when you're looking through your brushes is probably better for smudging than, say, this sharp pencil. But play with them because you won't know till you try it. And then there's an eraser brush, which I keep on a really smooth brush that erases really cleanly for most of the time. Again, you can set your eraser to any brush you have. So if I just wanted to like erase kind of in a foggy way, I could set my eraser to this mist brush I have. And then you see it doesn't erase the whole thing. It just kind of lightens it. So playing with those is really key to learning how they work. And you're just gonna have to spend a lot of time with them. I only have one layer in this file because I just started it and we haven't done anything in it. So that's all that's there. So we'll come back to that more. But I want to go on the last thing up in the corner is the color picker. And mine had a black circle because I was using black ink, so you couldn't see it. But it shows in the upper right corner whatever color you have selected. So now that I've selected that red, the same brush I was using is using red ink. So every brush you have can be used with any color, unlike a real pen or a pen that, unless it has a cartridge or a fountain pen for changing inks, or a pencil that's just one color. Any brush can have any color. So when you go into the color thing, you'll see on the bottom of that menu, there's a bunch of different ways to look at colors. The disc is the one that I use the most. And on the disc, you have the rainbow hues going around the outside edge. So you say, I sort of want a green, so you go over there. And then the middle part, you change how saturated it is, moving back and forth. So more green, brighter on the right, less green, less saturated on the left, and then lighter to darker, the value goes up and down. So anywhere in there you can pick and get the color set how you want. This is a classic thing that you may have seen in Photoshop or other other apps, and it has the same things here in these little sideways controls. It has the rainbow for the hues, it has a saturation slider, and it has a brightness and darkness. And those sliders just do the same things as the features on the disc, only it's sent in a rectangle. So one really handy feature on the disc that I use a lot is if you double tap near black or white, it goes to pure black or pure white. And that's really handy if you use black and white a lot for things. And then the other ones kind of go to the quadrants. But the black and the white are the ones I use the most for double tapping, especially black because I do my inking all in black. Color harmony is kind of fun to play with. If you want to learn about different kinds of color theory stuff and see what shows up, like if I pick this color, what is the complementary color of it? And you can do that. I don't use this a lot except messing around, but you might find it fun or interesting. Never have used the value slider, but you can mess with it if it makes sense to you. I find the disc the ultimate easiest. And then you have palettes. So Procreate comes with a few of these filled in, and you can make your own palettes from creating colors from scratch, or from a photograph, or by picking colors from a different image. So we'll go through that in one of our lessons too. But palettes are nice because, like, if you're doing a comic, a whole comic, and you want to have a consistent palette, you can put all your colors. This is the one I used for a comic that I did. Actually, I'm using it mainly for the series, although I've gone off it in a few ways. But I set this as my default palette by clicking on the default. See, they all say set default. Whichever one you have set as your default shows up underneath the color disc. So it's really handy to have that there all the time. Okay, so that's just basically what's on the screen. I want to show you what I do to learn about brushes, since I think that's a really important basic thing to get started with, is I have a whole selection of drawings called brushes. And I've done different things with them, just trying them out. Mostly what I do is just draw with the brushes and mark down what they do. So this is a selection of brushes I got called Pandem Ink. Yeah, I know, that's funny. But that's what the person who made the brush set called it, Pandem Ink. And so I got out a document and I played around with these brushes, and I went and found the Pandem Ink folder. When you import a new folder of brushes, it goes all the way to the top. Then you can move these around by just sliding them up and down the collections. But these are the Pandem Ink brushes that I got. So I just created this file. Has a few layers of stuff in it. And I just doodled around with the brushes and saw what each of them did. And I did them in the order that they are in the brush palette so that I could see them later. Sometimes I write down what they are in the file, and sometimes I don't. So that's why I tend to test them out in the order that they are in the brush palette so that I can go back and see. Now I want to get rid of these. So this is something most of you probably figured out, but you tap with 2 fingers to undo. If you tap with 2 fingers and hold it down, it will undo really fast a whole bunch of stuff. If you tap with 3 fingers, is redo. So if you ever watched videos of people doing classes in Procreate, you probably notice stuff like appearing and disappearing as they're drawing, because once you start working in Procreate, you start to do that undo a lot. You draw a line, you don't quite like it, it doesn't go quite where you want, so you click undo. So it's kind of a habit that you can pick up, and it sucks if you go back to paper and then your brain says undo and you've got ink on your paper and you can't get rid of it. So I suggest this week, if you just want something to play with, is or like the homework, to go into Procreate and make a document and mess around with some brushes, maybe the brushes that they supplied in the inking group. But you can get all kinds of brushes for free and for pay. For example, this is a set that I bought. It's from Lisa Bardot, B-A-R-D-O-T. She has a Bardot brush. That's her name of her website, Bardot brush, all one word, .com. And she's got a lot of free Procreate tutorials. I really recommend those if you want to spend extra time going through. Start with her basics. She's a really good teacher of Procreate, and she does it to sell her brushes. So just so you know that, she's going to use her brushes in the classes. But she shows you how to use layers and how to use the color picker and all the things. So you can learn a lot even if you don't want to use her brushes. I really liked her gouache brushes, so I bought them, and she provided this thing where she had done samples of all the brushes. So in addition to me playing with them, I saved her document that she provided in my folder about brushes. And I've done that for different things of brushes that I got. This is one I made of some brushes I got from a teacher on Skillshare. So I made a little chart, and I went again in the order of the brushes and just tried them all out on here. So now I know with these LK brushes, I know what they are, and they were a kind of watercolor brushes. There are some nice watercolor brushes with Procreate, so you don't have to buy any brushes just to get started. But that's a really good practice thing to do, just to try out whatever brushes you get, or the ones that are in Procreate if you haven't done that yet. Because a couple of you said you've tried different brushes, you want to learn more about brushes. At least one of you said you've only used one brush, and that's okay too, because you can use a brush to your preferences. And sometimes you can do a whole comic and you ink it all with one brush. I mean, so that's, one pen. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. Let's see. So a little bit more about brushes. There's some different things you can change in them. So I'm just going to create a new file again to start here. And I just want to show you something with the brushes. So this is one of those pandemic ones, but it doesn't matter what it is. This is a brush that is pretty smooth, a little bit lumpy or raw on the edges, but it's a pretty solid, smooth brush. When you click in the brushes palette, if you click on the brush, it's already highlighted. I clicked it once to select it. Now, if I click it again, it opens this brush studio. And we will spend some time in this later, because there's a lot of things you can change in the brush or create your own brush. But I just wanted to show you really one fun thing right now. If you're drawing anything from nature, there's a thing about 2/3 down called color dynamics. If you click on color dynamics, you'll see stamp color jitter at the top, and down there, stroke color jitter. A stamp in Procreate brushes, every time the brush makes one mark, that's a stamp. And a stroke is made up of a bunch of stamps, like probably thousands of them, that they're smushed together so close that it looks like a solid line, but really those are made out of separate dots. So if you try changing these settings, not the last one, don't mess with secondary color, but hue, saturation, lightness, and darkness. If you increase those a little bit on both stamp color and stroke color, or one or the other, you can play with it and see what happens. Your brush, well, this one's not really doing anything. A little bit it is. Let's pick a different color. Yeah, there you go. See how each time I make a line, it gets a little different. This one's lighter than that one. It's because I changed those color settings, and I can boost them up a lot. Every brush it will work a little differently on. Sometimes you only have to bring it up a little bit. This is, oh, there you can see it. See how that's changing? See how that made like a little like blurring of colors. This is just a really easy tip if you want to add a little dynamic to something you're coloring. It's a fun thing to play with. And all you do is go into the brush, go down to color dynamics and run those sliders up and down to try it out. So that's something you can play with the brushes. And that's you might be afraid to ruin your brush. So if you don't want to do it with the actual brush, because you're afraid you're going to ruin that brush and you won't be able to put it back how it is, when you have that brush selected, slide it to the left and you can click duplicate and it makes another copy of that brush, just puts a 1 at the end of it. So you can know that the one that has no number at the end of it was the original one, and the one that has a 1 at the end of it is the one that you duplicated, and you can mess around with that and then you never lose the original brush. So I think, I mean, as far as drawing goes, brushes are going to be the main thing because that's the drawing tool. But another thing that's interesting that you can do in Procreate, which you may or may not find useful for comics, is that you can use papers. And we'll do this in one of the lessons. This is a paper I got, and you can make your own papers too. You don't have to buy them. There's a lot of free ones. How do you make a paper? What does that even mean? Well, when I zoom in here, can you see how that has texture like a watercolor paper in the drawing? That's not done with the brush. That's done with layers of texture. So if I turn that off, if I turn the paper layers off, it's just plain smooth coloring and there's no texture in it. But these layers add the texture. And they do that by, someone mentioned that you can change the blending mode of a layer. It's usually normal. So if I click on my girl that was painted here and I click on the little tiny N on the right side, you can see this menu that opens on the bottom is the blending modes. It starts with normal. And that's what you use for most things that you want to be just solid in how you draw. These paper modes are changed to different modes. So this one is a darker color and the opacity is dropped back. If I set it to normal and I only look at that layer, if you hold down on the check mark on a layer, you will see only that layer. It hides everything else. And I bump up the opacity and zoom in, you can see that this is just the whole page is filled with basically a scan of watercolor paper. And that's put in here. So we're going to do this as part of one of our lessons, but also going to show you how to add the texture like that only to parts of your drawing. So if I set this to only see one layer, when I want to bring the rest back, I just click and hold that check box again and everything comes back. I'll show you how to do that on just parts of your drawings, because if you want to do a watercolor style in comics, you might not want the whole background to look like watercolor paper. You might want it to be clean white, or outside of your panels to be clean white, and just certain part to have the texture. And we'll look at how to do that too. And one of the ways is masks. So we are going to go through masks that someone mentioned earlier. So now I just want to show you something that I'm working on, just so you can kind of see how I work. So this is a comic that I'm working on now. And I started with one file that just had this layer in it, where I just drew little thumbnails of my pages. I did them really small because, well, I just wanted to see basically what the panels would be and so forth. As I work on my comic and I finish each page or get it to the next stage, I cut and pasted into this document so I can see how I'm doing on my progress, how far along I am on my progress. So here's my sketch here, 3 panels on the top, 1 on the bottom. And when I turn my other layer on above it, it shows where I am now with the drawing. This is something I do for myself, for my status. When I actually start a new comic, I go to this thumbnail page and I go to the selection tool. I think I got distracted and didn't show you the selection tool later when we were up here. So the selection tool lets you pick part of the screen, and it has automatic, which will pick everything that's connected in a single color. Turn that off and turn it back on. It has freehand where you can click to make a selection or just draw. Now I've selected that area. It also has a rectangle. So since this is a rectangle, I can just select it by dragging out like that instead of drawing around it. And it has ellipse, which I never use, but you might find useful. So now that I've selected that area and I have that layer selected, I can copy that. So I'm gonna click with 4 fingers because I customized this feature because I like that for copy. Normally for copy, you swipe down with 3 fingers, just 3 fingers, swipe down on the page, and it brings up this copy and paste menu. So I copied that. Okay, now I'm going to go into my folder and I make a page like this for my comics, which is the size I want it to be, and it has all the technical stuff in it like bleed line and cut line and safe zone. We'll talk about all of that in the next couple weeks. And then I have a grid that I make. I'll show you how I do that too. That helps me draw my panels. And I paste in my little thumbnail. It's so tiny, it's kind of a waste. But I click then here when I have pasted it, see it's selected with all those handles, and I can choose different things like flip vertical and horizontal, rotate it. I can drag it in uniform. It keeps the perspective. I can drag it freeform and distort it and warp it. I can do all kinds of things. But what I'm going to do is say fit to screen. And then I'm going to adjust it by dragging the handles. And here I'll say freeform so I can distort it more, make it wider. And I fit it into my grid so I can see what I'm going to do. And then I drop the opacity way back and add another layer on top of it. I can turn my grid off and on when I want to see it, like any layer. But now here I see I have these 3 panels and my little sketch underneath it, because my sketch is super messy. So I'm going to just show you how I draw my panels now when I have a grid and my sketch. And I want to draw like nice, fairly consistent panels. I have this brush I like for panels called Inca, and I changed it to Inca Panels. I changed the name so I would remember it. That's the brush I used for drawing my panels because it's kind of messy and I don't want my things to look too digital. So I'm going to draw rectangles with this brush, and I'm going to use my grid to create them in the system that I created for this. So this one I want to be half the height. And see, I'm drawing a really floppy rectangle here. And I go back to the beginning and I hold my brush down. Did you see how it straightened out? Because I didn't pick my brush up when I finished. It made it tidy. I can click edit shape now, and mine's not quite a rectangle. It made a polyline. I can click rectangle and it straightens it out. And now I have a rectangle. Because of this brush, the way this brush is not consistent, sometimes when I make a rectangle, I have to go fill in a couple of corners or whatever. So now I have 1 rectangle. I can draw 2 more, or I can go to my layer palette, swipe to the left and duplicate the layer, and then use that transform tool to copy it over. If I wanted to make it look a little less consistent, I can flip vertical or horizontal so that they don't look like they're all the same. And this is what I do to create my panels when I'm starting a new comic. I draw them on my grid. If several of them are going to be the same size and shape, I just copy and paste them and drag them around. Whoops, I'm on my eraser tool. This is something I am learning how to do is you can have a double tap feature on your pencil, where if I tap my pencil twice, it switches to eraser. If I tap it twice, it switches back to the paintbrush. And sometimes I'm fiddling with my brush and I tap it by accident. So I'm still like learning this feature, not to like play with my brush so much or my pencil. Okay, there's my last big one. It's already a rectangle. And so that's done. And then I've got several layers where I drew my boxes. So I have 3 of them. So here you click one layer and it selects it, it turns blue. If I want to select more than one layer, I swipe to the right on them. And now I want to make these all one layer. So I swipe to the right on them and then go up to the top and it says group. I can group them together and that puts them in a little folder. So that's one way I can do that. And I can close the folder and it looks like one thing. But I still have 3 layers. So if I'm worrying about running out of layers, I'm going to undo all the way to the group. So I don't have a group. I did undo my group. Now I have these 3 layers. I'm going to select all 3 of them. Instead of grouping them, I'm going to take my 2 fingers and I'm going to pinch them together and they have become one group. So you can see when I turn that layer on and off by clicking and unclicking the check mark, all of those disappear together. So that's how I start a comic. Those are a couple things maybe that you want to play with. The main homework is to make a document. It can be screen size or whatever. Pick whatever you want. So just to review, we go back to the gallery, which is our home page in Procreate. We're going to click plus and pick whatever you want that's already there. The screen size, square is good if you want to share it on Instagram, paper size. Some of these I added messing around, but just pick anything and start a new document and go into your brushes and your colors and play with different brushes and see what they do. Try remembering to try pressure, tilting the pencil, changing the size. And one more thing you can do is on the bottom on the left, or if you move this to the right, the bottom controller for the brush changes the opacity. So if you don't want to paint really solid with a brush, you can change it to less opaque. And then what's going to happen? I'm going to add a layer, because what I did there is it just looked like it changed it to a lighter color, but it's actually see-through. So you can still see the gray through the transparent red when I use this brush. If I turn the opacity all the way up and I'm on the top layer, it's actually just like you're layering pieces of paper on top of each other. The top layer will hide stuff underneath it. Now, if I draw with the opacity fully up, you can't see what's underneath it. So play with brushes, play with these controllers of the size and opacity of the brush, play with the pressure and tilt and changing the color of the brushes. And if you really are brave, you can go in and play with the color dynamics of the brush. And that's just what I want you to do this week. And then I will set up a lesson for next week where we will create a new comic. We'll pick our paper size and I'll show you how I set up the grid and things like that. And so we'll just go step by step through different things together. So that's it for today. Do you guys have any questions before I declare that we're finished for the day?
Just a quick question. Do I have to get used to the idea that my pen is a brush?
Yes, your pen is a brush. So we call, it's actually a pen or a pencil. Did you say you have the, that Inky, did you say you have the Logitech?
Logitech, yes.
Yeah, that's a nice one too. It's got the same tip as the Apple one. There's other kinds that you can get. I don't know if you could see, because I have my light off. This is actually this is the old kind of stylus that has the rubbery thing. I don't like
Yes,
that.
yes.
But this one also has a paintbrush on the other end that is inductive, so you can use that. There's other kinds of brushes you can get. The Apple Pencil, because the Apple and Procreate work together, there are some features, like I said, the pressure sensitivity will work different on different brushes. The Logitech is the closest to the Apple Pencil.
Yes,
It doesn't
yes.
have the pressure sensitivity, I don't think, but it does have the tilt.
yes.
It has the
It has
tilt.
the tilt,
feature.
exactly.
But it has
and it doesn't
the
have
Apple
Bluetooth.
tip.
Yes,
Ah, okay.
it has the same
It
tip.
connects
And
automatically.
yes, and I just wanted to know if I have to get used to thinking that my pen, which I will use, will be called a brush in Procreate. And I think it's the case. Yeah,
And
thank you.
Apple calls it a pencil. We tend to think of it as a pen. And even if you're using a pencil brush or an inking brush, Procreate's going to call it a brush, even though we would think if we were using paper, we would use a pencil, a pen, and maybe a brush if we're going to paint. So yeah, terminology is different. So, and Procreate made up some of their own stuff that's different than other graphics programs. So part of what we'll be learning for those of you who have used Photoshop and things is, what is this? Okay, I know how to use Photoshop, but how do I do this? What is it called in Procreate, or where is it hidden in Procreate? So we'll be covering things from beginning if you know nothing, and we'll also be comparing them to what they're called in some other softwares that are popular. Any other questions?
Donna, if I may.
Ashish, you had your hand raised?
So one of the struggles I have while using Procreate is maintaining the resolution. So most of my lines, especially if I shrink or expand pictures like you were showing using the selection tool, my resolution completely messes up and I see my lines become very pixelated. So,
oh yes, they will. You cannot enlarge things. You cannot enlarge things in Procreate because it's a bitmap or pixel-based image. When you enlarge it, you just see the pixels more. And so when I enlarged my little tiny sketch there in the background, yes, it got very blurry. Turn the opacity back up, it got very blurry and pixelated, and that's going to happen. So when we talk about creating a new file, we'll talk about making it at a high enough resolution so that you can, first of all, if it's going to match something you're going to print, and second of all, usually I make mine bigger than I need to in case I want to crop something or enlarge it. You don't actually enlarge the thing because it gets pixelated, but you make the page, you crop the page so the thing is smaller in the page, larger in the page. So we'll talk about that. That's pretty technical, but it's very important if you're going to be printing comics, or even if you're going to be doing something for the screen like web comics or Instagram, to understand that. So we'll definitely be going over that. But the main thing is, if you make something bigger beyond a little bit, it's going to get blurry. So draw stuff, when in doubt, draw stuff full bigger than you think you're going to want it, or because if you can make it a little smaller. The thing about it though, again, because it's bitmap, is that if I take this layer that I made big and I make it smaller again, my lines get much thinner because it scales the whole thing. And that's just the nature of bitmap graphics. So we'll be talking about that. And we will talk a little bit about vector graphics later on, because I use them for some things in my comics, and there are some things you might want to use them for. We're not going to get into it a lot. It's totally different than this kind of stuff, and it's much more complicated, and I basically hate it. But there's a couple things I use it for that I have shortcuts for, like speech balloons. I use it mostly for speech balloons. Anyone else? Okay, Deb's waving. You waving a question or bye? Bye. Okay, well, thanks everyone for helping me test this out. I'm gonna try to see if I can make myself be not invisible next week, in 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we're gonna do this.
Yes.
So play with your brushes for a couple weeks and I will see you again. Thanks very much. And
Thanks,
so much,
Donna.
Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye-bye.
Sorry.